Welcome, welcome, welcome. I popped on first. I switched it up a little bit. But we're going to have a good one tonight. I'm glad everybody's there. I see people talking in the chat as usual. So I hope you have enjoyed yourself and had a good week. So I wanted to do something on a Friday so we can hang out a little bit. All right. So tonight we're going to be in Judge Johnson's court in Michigan. And she has a guy that pretty much violated because he had a drug test and he failed it. And so now they have two experts in court talking about his test. So we're going to go ahead and check that out. It's really good. It's a lot of technical stuff in there. So it's actually a trial testimony back and forth from two expert people that deal with that type of stuff. So I think you're going to like it. All right. So let me get myself together here. And thank everyone for hanging out. Good. I'm glad you got that. Yeah, I tried to send it out kind of early. And hello to everyone that's still coming in. I appreciate y'all being here. And all right, we in for the long haul tonight. Let's go.
So this is case number 24M00414SD, People State of Michigan versus Lucian Hudson.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Courtney Rosa on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Jennifer Smith, P number 83034, on behalf of Lucian Hudson, who's present in the courtroom and standing to my right. Mr. Hudson, can you please take the person next to me?
Lucian Hudson, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Hudson, how do you pronounce your middle name?
Dakira.
Dakira. Okay. All right. And so we are here today. This is a probation violation matter on an operating with a high bodily alcohol content of 0.17 or more. And we've been trying to get experts in this regard because the allegations go back to July 16, 2025. Defendant had tested positive for alcohol, was the allegation, sometime prior to that date. And it looks like those dates would have been May 25th, 25, June 11th, and June 26th of June 26th, 25. He was negative on the 11th. So 2 days, the 25th of May, 26th of June. And we had some confirming ETS testing. And I believe that counsel for the defense wanted to challenge those tests. Is that right? Where we are, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
Is Ms. Fisher joining us today?
I don't know.
Ms. Foster?
No, Ms. Fisher, the probation officer who issued the report.
Oh, I've been subpoenaed. Ms. Fisher.
Is she here?
I believe so.
She might be. We could see if she could come up. All right. So now we have all parties present for the hearing. So.
Your Honor, as in preliminary, madam, can we just confirm that Dr. Wagner can hear us, okay?
Okay, sure. Dr. Wagner, are you present there? Might have stood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Ms. Foster's chair is also empty, Judge, so I'm not sure if we could also confirm for Ms. Foster.
Oh, yeah. Ms. Foster, are you present?
And I'll just let the court know that Ms. Foster had every intention of being present in person here today, but the testing employee out of the 52-1 district court who was testing is sick. And so she is there to cover that.
Okay.
But Ms. Foster was on the camera just a moment ago. Hopefully she'll
Yeah.
come back.
She was. She literally just got up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do we need to wait? Because I don't know who needs to, and we're not sequestering witnesses for this, are we? We're just, everybody's going to be hearing what the other is saying and giving opinions. Okay. Okay, well, listen. Normally, the prosecution goes first because it's their burden of proof on a violation. So who's going first?
I'm happy to saying so we can keep it moving if we don't know where Ms. Foster is. I'm happy to get it.
Who did you want to start with first, Ms. Rosenau? What witness did you want to call?
Well, I will call Ms. Foster. I believe Ms. Smith wants to clarify that the court's sheet summarizing the violations is correct.
Okay.
And for that to be correct.
Oh, there's Ms. Foster. We're ready. Okay, Ms. Foster, could you please raise your right hand to take an oath? And let me find you here.
Ms. Foster, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute. Okay, Ms. Foster, can you see me right now
Yes,
facing this camera I'm facing? Because I can turn the other way if I need to.
yes.
All right, so you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. All right, go ahead, Madam Prosecutor.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Foster. Would you please tell the court what you do?
I am the gatekeeper and the owner of ADCS, which is an alcohol and drug testing facility.
How long have you been employed as someone who tests alcohol and drugs?
Prior to JAMS and EverHealth, I have been working in this field for 27 years, and ADCS, as of this month, has been open for 3 years.
And just so we're clear, what is your name for the record?
It's Michelle Foster, Michelle with 2 L's, Foster.
And ADCS has been open how long now?
This month is 3 years.
Okay, great.
Prior to your 27 years, when you did tests, did you have any prior experience to that?
No,
Do you have an educational background that would lend itself useful to this sort of work?
my educational background was in occupational therapy, which I decided that I didn't want to pursue. And in the 27 years that I worked with JAMS, I attended several toxicology sessions in learning how to interpret test results.
So were you doing any sort of testing yourself during those 27 years with JAMS?
Absolutely, I still test. I'm here at the court in Novi testing today. Excuse my appearance, Your Honor. I thought the hearing would be earlier and I didn't bring my clothes with me.
Okay, no problem.
Have you had any other trainings related to testing or toxicology?
Yeah, so the trainings that I've had to do were with several of the laboratories that we did the collections for. We started with ETGs back when SAMHSA did a release in 2006, stating that they really weren't using it for Department of Labor testing because it was too new, and that the cutoff value should be anywhere from 500 nanograms to as high as 1,000 nanograms. And if ETS, which is ethyl sulfate, was created first, they wouldn't do ETGs because one can be have positive ETGs that are environmental or from bacterial infections. And ETS eliminates that.
So I was just referring to the trainings that you've attended, but that was something you learned at a training?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other trainings that you've attended that help you in your profession?
No, they've all been the same. I usually attend, a lot of times I attend the same sessions that the judges attend and that the probation officers attend.
How many people have you tested over the course of your career?
With JAMS, I would say that we had well over 40,000 ETG, ETSs on a regular basis in all that time.
And how about with your business, ADCS? How many people have you tested through these last 3 years?
I do about 4,500 a month.
Are you personally doing those tests or are you overseeing staff who does the testing?
Sometimes I do collections myself. I monitor clients myself also. And anyone that needs to have an ETG done, that sample is collected and couriered by Northwest Labs to the lab in Southfield, Michigan.
Or someone by the name of Lucian Hudson?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Mr. Hudson?
Most of the time before Mr. Hudson stopped testing with us at the Detroit location, I was the one that was there unless it was a weekend or a day that I had to cover a different location.
Are you able to see the people in the courtroom on your screen?
Yes,
Would you recognize Mr. Hudson if he were present?
yes.
Do
He's
you recognize Mr. Hudson?
He's sitting to your right.
Would you just describe an article of his clothing?
Yes, looks like he has on a gray suit, maybe?
Let the record reflect the witnesses identified.
He's the only one in here with a suit on other than you. So yes, in court identification of the defendant.
Did you assist, you stated that you did some testing for Mr. Hudson?
Correct.
And have you reviewed results of the tests that were completed with your business?
Yes.
You've analyzed those results?
No, the toxicologist at Northwest Lab, all of his samples go to Northwest Lab. So the toxicologist reads the test. She confirms that the information is a match. She confirms that when the chain of custody that he's filled out is completed by everyone in her staff to acknowledge that his name, his date of birth, and the date of the testing is correct. And then once she releases the results, once I know that there's going to be a hearing, I reach out to talk to her to ask her to review them again, so that in case she has a different interpretation after her second review, I'll have that information for the court.
Did you make that second contact with the toxicologist in Mr. Hudson's case?
Yes, for all three of the positive ETS that he had.
And have you formed opinions regarding those 3 positive tests?
Only that in my conversation with the toxicologist is that all of those, the cutoff for ETS or ethyl sulfate is 100 nanograms, and all 3 of his tests are above that.
Have you yourself formed opinions? That's just my question.
Yes, according to
Yes.
my conversation with the toxicologist, it indicates that that this is a drinking out incident.
Okay, and I'll get into the violations in just a moment. I'm gonna ask the court to accept this witness as an expert in the field of drug and alcohol testing.
Yeah, well, any objection to it? No, then I'm going to qualify her as an expert. She certainly has independent knowledge that would be helpful to a trier fact to determine issues, of fact, that issue in this matter. So, and she certainly seems to have a number of years of background training and experience in this area. So we'll qualify her as an expert in this type of drug and alcohol toxicology.
Just like to reflect for the record, I was given no notice that council intended to tender this with his staff officer, and I was not provided with a copy of her curriculum finding.
Okay.
I don't have a copy of her either. We just went over her qualifications on the record. If the defense counsel would like to voir dire her, I'm more than willing to step aside.
That's fine, Your Honor. I just wanted to clear it. So.
Okay. Well, then
Y'all always find a way to make a joke.
she's qualified. Go ahead.
Ms. Foster, you previously mentioned that you were aware of 3 positive tests in this case. Is that true?
Yes,
I'd like to discuss each of those with you separately. What was the date of the first positive test for Mr. Hudson?
was May 25th, 2025. He reported to the office at 7:39 in the morning. The lab actually processed his sample on May 27th, and the results are positive. The ETS result is 114 nanograms, which is above the 100.
Your Honor, if this is by Ms. Foster maybe reading from documents, can we just ensure that if she is referencing documents, that I'm made aware of what it is she's looking at?
Okay, Ms. Foster, do you have a document that you're using?
Yes, I'm using the report that has Northwest Labs at the top. In the middle, it has Mr. Hudson's name, his date of birth, his ID number with us, that he's a male, the accession number that belongs to this collection, the time that it was collected in our office, and the time that the lab processed it in the facility.
Okay.
25th, looking at this test result, please explain to me the process by which Mr. Hudson came in to provide the sample and test, provide these results.
When he comes in to test, our website has a picture of him because I've seen him often. He tests a couple of times a week, so I know exactly what he looks like when I'm there. Most of my other techs do also. We then have him give us a sample. We have a tube that the urine goes into a cup that has a siphon on the top. So once we have the sample, the urine sample, we're able to siphon the urine into the tube. A barcode is placed on the tube that has the same accession number on it that this report has. And then he has to sign that is his information.
And that urine sample is then sent out to the toxicologist?
Yes, it is. Sent out to Northwest Lab.
Is it tested by ETG first, ETS first, or something different?
Well, actually his sample, he does a full comp panel, which has a large opiate panel, a large benzo panel. It does an ETG and an ETS. In several cases, the ETG might be negative, but as long as the ETS is positive above 100 nanograms, that's what I report to the court.
What are the differences between ETG testing and ETS testing? I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier with your training, but specifically, what should we be looking for as differences between the two?
ETG is called the abbreviation is for ethyl glutaride, and it can be influenced by someone who's an uncontrolled diabetic. It can be influenced by bacterial infections. It can be influenced by environmental things, especially since COVID. Several products that people in the medical field, the automotive field, the percentage of alcohol is well above 70% in some instances. And usually, sometimes there are people that can trigger a positive ETG that are in the 2, the 3, the 4,000s. But if an ETS is done, it's usually negative if it's from environmental exposure.
So for those of us lay people who just heard a lot of big science words, what I'm hearing is that the ETG can be influenced by outside alcohol, not necessarily drinking, but the ETS is more clear and is only affected by the drinking of alcohol.
Correct. ETS is more specific, and it eliminates the possibility of the environmental exposures.
Now, you said earlier, I believe, that the ETG testing started first.
Yes, in the beginning, in 2006, SAMHSA decided for the Department of Labor that if we're doing ETGs, we should not use any cutoff that is below 500 nanograms. And then in 2011, they made a change that as long as you were using a cutoff that was between 500 nanograms and 1,000 nanograms, that's when most collection agencies started doing ETGs on a regular basis.
What point did ETS testing come into the mix?
ETS was first, but the problem was in the beginning, if someone was only going to do an ETS, it was a lot more expensive of a test to do.
And so is it more common to do ETG testing or ETS testing?
ETS is the priority, which is why Northwest Lab. So you'll note Northwest Lab sees people that are from doctor's offices and pain management centers. They use a lower cutoff, which we don't use. So let's say, for example, if he had a positive ETG that was 525 and the ETS was negative, his results would be reported to the court as a negative test.
So it's the ETS that matters for your purposes because that is the specific test. Correct. Understood. Going back to this May 25th, 2025 collection date for the sample that Mr. Hudson gave, that was tested for both ETG and ETS?
Correct.
What is the cutoff that was used for ETG testing for that sample?
The lab uses a 200 nanogram cutoff, again, because of the nature of the people that they're testing in bulk, but we still only observe the 500 nanogram cutoff for an ETG.
What was Mr. Hudson's ETG results from May 25th?
They're reported as negative because they're below the cutoff that the lab uses.
So you're saying that it was below the cutoff that the lab uses, but still recognizable on the ETG testing?
It's not. If it were recognizable, you'd see a positive for the ETG as well. So anything that's below the cutoff. So even if the lab used the cutoff of 500 nanograms, if what the toxicologist viewed in reviewing each of these samples was 499, it would still be reported as a negative, as long as the ETS is positive.
And what was Mr. Hudson's ETG from this sample?
It was negative. We don't see any numbers on the report.
Now let's talk about ETS. What is the cutoff for ETS that Northwest Labs uses?
They use a 50 nanogram cutoff. And again, we use the SAMHSA cutoff that is recommended of 100 nanograms. And this test result is 114. nanograms.
I'm sorry, you said somebody recommended that you use 100 nanograms?
SAMHSA recommends that you use the 100 nanograms.
What is Santra?
SAMHSA is associated with the Department of Labor, who does a lot of people that are required to test on a random basis, if they're bus drivers, if they're railroad people, if they're pilots. Those people fall into a specific category, and if they test positive at 100 nanograms and above for ETS, they're considered positive for a drinking incident.
Do you know why that 100 nanogram cutoff is used rather than the 50 nanogram cutoff or something else?
Well, if he tested positive at a 50 nanogram because it's below the 100, I wouldn't report that as a positive to the court. That's something that the lab uses for the physicians and the pain facilities that they treat, that they test for.
What was the ETS result for Mr. Hudson from the 525 sample?
Is 114 nanograms.
So 100 nanograms is the cutoff, and Mr. Hudson tested at 114 nanograms.
Correct.
Are you able to equate that 114 nanograms to number of drinks drank or?
Objection, Your Honor. This expert has been, or I'm sorry, this witness has been tendered and admitted as an expert in testing. There's been no testimony to establish that Ms. Foster has the requisite knowledge, education, training, or background to formulate an expert opinion to correlate between an ETS or an ETG level and alcohol consumption.
All right, let's see if she can even answer. Do you think you could even answer that?
Yes. From
Okay.
over the years, I talked to at
Okay.
least
So hold
7
on.
to 10.
So then you need to establish how she can answer that.
I would love to do that, Your Honor. Please tell us how you have come to be able to make that transition from the ETS testing number to number of drinks drank or that sort of thing. Where have you learned that skill from?
I've gotten it from the different toxicologists that I've had to work with over the years. Starting with the doctor that invented the ETG ETS is Dr. Skipper. There's another doctor called Dr. Leo Kadesian that I usually refer to, especially if I have someone who is contesting the results because they indicate that they have not had any alcohol at all. So sometimes I'll reach out to a different toxicologist, give him the test results, and have them send me and have them discuss with me the interpretation. There are several facilities or labs that will use what they call an LOD, which stands for the lower level of detection. However, most of the toxicologists that are in this field for the criminal justice department or for probation people, they do not recommend going below the level of detection. So if the cutoff is supposed to be 500 for an ETG, if it's supposed to be 100 for ETS, if I go in with a report that has numbers that are below that, and I'm trying to tell you that it's because that person was ingesting alcohol, I'd be incorrect to do that because it's a negative test if it doesn't reach the biomarkers for the cutoff.
Understood. Those doctors that you mentioned or scientists, did they specifically teach you or did they write something that you read that taught you how to equate the testing results to a number of drinks that would have been drinking?
Actually, you cannot use an ETG or an ETS to compare to a person doing a PBT because they're different methodologies. So ETG, ETS stays in the urine longer. PBTs, usually between 10, 12 hours, depending on the amount of alcohol the person drank, what they weigh, and if it's a male or a female.
Are you able to say how many drinks Mr. Hudson would have had to determine this, to make this result? That's my question.
I'm again going to object.
Just hold on. We know you got the objection. Just trying to find out if she can answer that question. She said she could answer how many drinks. I then asked her to lay the foundation. I'm not sure she's answering the question though. Miss Foster, can you actually tell how many drinks somebody has had based upon an ETS result?
No.
Boom. There you go.
Well, they're trying to get her. They're trying to trip her up. But she the expert, so hope she don't mess up.
So let's go back to this 114 positive ETS result from May 25th, 2025. Based on everything that you received in this report, are you confident that the positive ETS test is from drinking alcohol?
According to the toxicologist, yes.
And why is that?
Your Honor, I object to this line of questioning. She has no specific knowledge. She is testifying on what amounts to basically hearsay from a toxicologist, which is not present to testify, and she's not been tendered as an expert in toxicology.
Okay. Well, she's definitely not an expert in quote toxicology, I don't think.
I would argue that A, it goes along with testing, and B, pursuant to MCR 6.445E1.
Well, we can have hearsay. I know that.
Yeah.
So the question is though, does she know enough on her own to form that opinion, or can she report what the toxicologist told her? Well, hearsay is okay in violation of probation hearings, so I guess we can take it from that standpoint, and then we can go from there.
Thank you.
But the issue, Your Honor, is it's not her personal knowledge, and there's been nothing here to establish that she's ever had any training, any professional education. She was an occupational therapist, judge. That has nothing to do with testing.
She's reporting what somebody else told her though, which she can do because it's hearsay.
She's provided minimal information, absolutely no foundation as to when, as to what. Judge, it's
Well, okay, fair enough there. When and where, what is she relying on to come to the conclusion about the question about the positive ETS? So you can establish that. Who's she relying, what expert she relying on, and for what purpose?
Well, Your Honor, I'm asking for questions based upon the test results that she reviewed.
Okay,
Rules of evidence don't apply to this.
I know.
Too.
but let's find out whose test did she review first of all. Let's find that out.
Ms. Foster, whose test results did you review? The toxicologist on this violation?
I reviewed Mr. Hudson's test results for all
Who,
three.
who was the toxicologist though
Yeah,
that came
Her
up
name
with the
is,
result?
Tamara Jablonski.
And did you, the last name cut out, so I'll use the first name. Did you speak with Tamara regarding this positive test?
Yes, I did.
Did you speak with her one time or more than one time?
I spoke to her. I think we've been back and forth to court already, maybe 3-4 times. I've reached out to her every time to confirm that there was no difference in the interpretation that she discussed with me.
And what was that interpretation that she discussed with you?
That this is a positive ETS, which it would indicate a drinking incident because it's above the SAMHSA cutoff of 100 nanograms.
And based on your training and experience and everything that you've learned through all of the tests that you've done for thousands of individuals, do you know if this was from drinking alcohol, if that produced this positive test?
Yes, according to all the toxicologists that I've trained with over the last several years, anytime someone has a positive ETS above 100 nanograms is an incident of drinking. Unless they can prove that they've been exposed to something else. And then if that were the case, I would reach out to the toxicologist to give them that information, which I did have for one of the tests that Mr. Hunston had. He did provide me with a list. I gave that list with her. She reviewed it with me and told me that no, that this was specifically a positive ETS.
Was that in regards to this violation or one of the other violations?
One of the others.
In regards to this violation, did Mr. Hudson tell you that there might have been another source of alcohol?
No.
Did Mr. Hudson tell you anything about this violation from May 25th?
No.
So you have no reason to believe this is anything other than drinking.
That's correct.
Could this ETS result be produced from environmental alcohol?
Excuse me, what did you say?
Could this ETS result of 114 be produced from environmental alcohol?
There isn't environmental alcohol that would reach a level of a positive because the ETG is negative.
You're saying that the level is too high to be affected by that?
No. The ETG at 114 nanograms indicates that this is an incident from drinking alcohol.
ETS, right?
For ETS, correct.
Are you positive about that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'd like to move on to the next violation. What was the date on the next violation that you're aware of?
I'm looking at a Northwest Labs report that was collected in our office on 6/11 at 6:37 p.m. that has his identification number, his date of birth, the person who tested him, and that the lab received his sample the very next day on the 12th. This test, the ETS, is positive at 235 nanograms.
So almost double the cutoff, or more than double.
That's correct.
Who was the toxicologist, if anyone, that you spoke with regarding this test?
Same one, tomorrow.
And you've spoken with Tamara multiple times with this one as you did with the previous incident. Is that correct?
Yes,
Given that Mr. Hudson's ETS level was at 235 nanograms, which is 135 nanograms over the cutoff, are you confident that this result was from him drinking alcohol?
according to my conversation with the toxicologist, absolutely.
Did he give you a list of possible alcohols that could have affected this result, or was that for the last one?
I'd have to look back at my notes because no, it's the one from the 26th that he gave me the information of. It was just after he had COVID, I believe.
So Mr. Hudson did not provide anything to you that would suggest there might be another cause for the positive ETS results on this date.
Correct.
I'd like to move to the final violation date of June 26, 2025. Would you please indicate for the court the report that you're going to look at to speak about this violation?
This is a report from Northwest Labs that has Mr. Hudson's name, his identification number, his date of birth, that he reported at 8:52 in the morning, and the lab had his sample the very next day on 6/27. This test is positive at ETS at 215 nanograms.
Was the ETG positive?
No,
So the ETG was negative for all three of these tests.
that's correct.
But the more specific test, the more accurate test, it was positive for all three of these tests.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, what was the ETS number on this specific instance?
It's
215.
215 nanograms.
And you spoke with the toxicologist?
Yes,
Is that also tomorrow?
yes,
And based on your conversation with her and your review of the results, are you positive that this positive test was from drinking alcohol?
correct.
Now, in the course of our conversations, Ms. Foster, have I provided you with information that was provided to me from the defense?
Yes,
Did you review the materials that I sent to you?
yes,
You would agree with me that within those materials was a number of breath alcohol testing results, right?
correct.
And some of those results had Mr. Hudson's photo on them when he was taking the test, and some of them didn't. Is that right?
Correct.
Did you have anything to do with this breath alcohol testing?
No,
Did you know that he was breath alcohol testing at the same time he was testing with your company?
I believe with me, hold on one second. Let me look at his record again. I'm sorry, I'm at the Novi port. They cut off the Wi-Fi for me, so I had to turn it back on.
Are you ready to proceed?
Yes,
So we were discussing the breath alcohol testing results, and I had asked you if you were aware that he was taking breath tests.
no, I wasn't.
So that was never reported to you and not done through your company.
That's correct. I wasn't aware of that or the NA meetings or AA meetings that he was attending. I didn't know about either of those. We don't check for those.
So Mr. Hudson's not required to provide any of that information to you?
Correct.
Does he have the option to provide that sort of information so that it would be used in the analysis of his results?
If he wanted to, yes. I wouldn't advise him to give it to any of my techs, but if he wanted to provide it to me, yes.
Would that affect your opinion on how some of these results are interpreted?
No,
So if I were to tell you, and you've reviewed these records, but you'd agree with me that all of these breath alcohol tests are negative, is that right?
correct.
Does this surprise you based on the results of the ETS testing that we've just discussed?
No,
Why?
because PBTs are for a shorter window of detection. It would depend on how much he drank, and it would depend on when he took his drug testing. So that would be my major thought. I would never ask him if he's using a device. If he came in and I smelled alcohol, I would actually ask him if he would take a PBT test so that I can make sure that he's nowhere near a 0.08, so he doesn't leave my facility that with a positive test. And I would report that information to the court. I've never had to do that with Mr. Hudson.
Okay. Have you had instances before with other clients perhaps where the PBT test resulted in 0 tests, but the ETS testing is positive for alcohol?
Yes, I've actually had people take a PBT in the morning and both the ETG and ETS are negative. Mainly because they're two different methodologies. So the ETG ETS goes back for a longer period of time than a PBT does.
Do you know what the specific window is for a PBT?
Anywhere between 10 and 12 hours, but again, it depends on what they were drinking and how much they consumed prior to us doing the collection.
And again, you weren't overseeing any of these tests, right?
That's correct.
You don't know if they're accurate or who was overseeing these tests.
That's correct. I have no idea.
And the instances where there's no photograph of the person who was taking the test, is it true based on your experience and knowledge that anybody could have blown into that PBT?
I'm gonna object, Your Honor. There's been no facts brought into evidence to support that Ms. Foster has any knowledge as to the specific type of testing, the device that was used. In fact, she just said she's not really familiar with these protocols here. And for the record, the documents that she's referring to are the road guard inner lab reports, which are monitored by the state of Michigan. It was required for Mr. Hudson to have it in his car so he could get a license back.
Well, the question here to Ms. Foster was, based upon her experience, could anybody have taken the test based upon this interlock device that she don't have experience with?
The question.
Yeah.
I honestly am not super familiar, so I
Okay.
don't know if there's any way to verify.
Well, then I'll sustain her objection and you can withdraw it. Go ahead. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Ms. Foster, we briefly touched on one instance where Mr. Hudson sent you an email after he had COVID and talked about some medicines that he took. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Do you have that email in front of you?
1 second. I can tell you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I cannot pull up the email that he sent me from here.
Just show him the email that I'm referring to Ms. Smith. You remember sending me an email though, and you remember receiving an email, is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to submit to you that Mr. Hudson reported to you in that email that he had consumed, because of his diagnosis with COVID, cold and flu nighttime multi-symptom relief, maximum strength FLU HVP, non-drowsy daytime multi-symptom cold flu relief, airborne assorted flavored gummies, maximum strength cough drops, chloroseptic sore throat spray, ibuprofen, and acetaminophen extra strength.
That's a lot of stuff. And this hearing was this week. So I know you heard COVID, like what? Yeah. So that's a lot of stuff he's putting on that list.
And Mr. Hudson says in the email that he was taking these medications during the time of the June 26th test.
Correct.
I ain't gonna lie, that sounds suspect to me. Because a lot of those medicines will give you reading. So if he had something, he could have said he had that.
He stated he tested on June 11th prior to departing for Jamaica and on June 17th upon returning from Jamaica. Do you remember reading this email?
Yes.
Does this email and the types of drugs that the defendant took, does that change your opinion on whether Mr. Hudson was drinking on June 26th?
I'm gonna object, Your Honor. I don't think that she has the knowledge or the education to make an opinion as to how medications could affect these results. I think if anything, she'd have to report on, did she discuss this with the toxicologist and what did they have to say?
Which I did.
Well, that would be her answer possibly then, perhaps, right?
Well, Your Honor, then I think counsel should have to flesh that out somewhere with their main questioning, because the way the question was asked of Ms. Foster was, did she have an opinion?
Nice weekend. I shall. You as well, sir.
Why can't she say yes, and then she can ask her, well, what's that opinion based on? And then she could say, my conversation with the toxicologist.
She could, Your Honor. However, counsel has very distinctly made, had lines of questions where she was asking her, did you speak with the toxicologist? What was that conversation versus what is yours?
Okay, well, let's just make clear if this is her own opinion or her opinion based upon what the toxicologist has told her. And then she can answer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Foster, in regards to these drugs that Mr. Hudson detailed in his email, did either you or the toxicologist form an opinion about how these drugs affect the ETS results from June 26th?
Yes.
Who formed that opinion, the toxicologist or you?
Yes. When he sent me the list, I emailed the list to Tamara. We went through it. She acknowledged that some of the medication, the over-counter medications that he's taken did not have alcohol in it. A lot of the non-drowsy cough products don't have alcohol in them. Same thing with NyQuil. If you're using NyQuil, yes, NyQuil has like 35% alcohol in it. If you're using Dayquil so that you're not drowsy during the day, Dayquil will not trigger a positive test.
Would it ever be possible for someone to trigger a positive ETS test from the consumption of cold medicines like NyQuil or other alcohol-containing cold medicines?
There are cold medicines that have codeine in it, which would trigger a positive in the drug test. He never had a positive drug test for this test after the COVID period.
But it's your opinion based on your conversation with the toxicologist that this list.
Objection, meeting.
They're such a.
I wanted to welcome Wolfpack for coming in. I was trying to wait for some more to come in here. That way most of you can hear it. So thanks for coming over and hanging out tonight.
It's a
vibe hearing, so overrule. Go ahead.
It's your opinion based on the email that you read in your conversation with the toxicologist that these drugs could not have affected the ETS result of the 215 nanograms. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have a basis for that opinion other than your conversation with the toxicologist?
No, I'm going by my conversation with the toxicologist and with the other toxicologists that I've worked with over the years. As I mentioned earlier, if he had taken something that had triggered a positive ETG, but it wasn't from a drinking incident, the ETS would be negative.
Do you have any other information related to any of these three positive tests?
No, I do not.
Thank you, Ms. Foster, for your testimony. I'm going to ask you to stay on the line because I might need further testimony after we hear from us, okay?
Not a problem.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit People's Exhibits 1 through 4, being the three test results that we discussed. Under the order.
Are these those
We have,
attached to the probation report? These ones are. I don't know if you have more than these three.
well,
But you can mark them.
You can look at them.
Yeah, you can mark them.
Which one are you looking at, Dutch? May 25th would be 1, June 11th would be 2, June 26th would be 3. And then I just put the email in there so that the judge has all the information. That's flawed. And approach.
Yes.
Sorry.
Those are different. See, I have these.
Okay.
It's
Might have
basically
more
the
details.
same thing. Yeah.
I've highlighted the dates.
Okay. Okay. All right, the courts received these exhibits. Did you have some questions from Ms. Foster?
I do, Your Honor. Here. Ms. Foster, can you
Who did that? Admiral Mary Tom. Thanks for gifting the memberships, and for the people that received them, congratulations. Welcome to the trust. So now y'all part of the group. All right. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
If you can't at any time, please let me know. I'm happy to repeat. I'm getting a little cold, so, my voice is not improved.
Okay.
First and foremost, you indicated that your position at the laboratory is that of, and a quote, gatekeeper and owner, correct?
Correct.
What is a gatekeeper?
I'm sorry. Did you ask me if I'm the gatekeeper?
Then what is a gatekeeper?
The gatekeeper is the person who's responsible for reviewing results, making sure that my staff are doing collections, and the testing in the proper manner. I'm the only one that can release test results. I'm the only one that attends hearings.
Are you the only one that attends training?
And I'm the only one that attends training. And then I train my staff.
Judge, I can, briefly, I guess, pause on my questions for Ms. Foster. It sounds like Ms. Fisher would like to orally make a record to amend her report based on the testimony and information.
The report that we're talking about that's dated March 11th, 2026.
The probation report that is actually issued today, and it's been issued previously.
All right.
So I'll make the motion, Judge, on behalf of the witness here. Based on the testimony of Ms. Foster, I think there's been a, some sort of error that ETG results should read as negative for all three of these violations. The ETS results are correct.
1:30 p.m.
All right. So that's what Ms. Fisher would like to do, is amend her report to say ETGs were negative for May 25th, June 11th, and June 26th.
And I'm going to release Ms. Fisher so that she can.
Go home?
The court needs her.
I didn't ask her up here, so I didn't know why she wanted her, but I understand now. So she doesn't really have anything to add to the issue other than what she got from Miss Foster. So, and what she got from the lab.
Oh, the judge has my original report. So
I have an original report where? Yeah, sure.
I didn't know original results.
Okay, Rhonda just gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate that. Appreciate you. For the people that just received it, congratulations. We have more trust members now. Thank you very much, and I hope y'all enjoy the membership.
She has different results than I do. You know, I think when I was typing it, well, this one says. Correct, not the city itself. If you have something else, I don't know. This June 26th says on this report, it says positive for the ETG. So that's where I got that information from.
Yeah,
But
and you're
the
looking at an
other-
ADCS
Yeah, but
typed report.
the lab reports that we have now are far more detailed and they do state as negative. So I'm not sure if why that happened. So either way, the ETG on the more detailed lab report says negative.
Okay, and so and I could just ask Miss Foster. Miss Foster, I guess the issue, we got the more detailed Northwest Labs report here, but what I was looking at and then what Ms. Fisher was looking at when she typed her report was your ADCS laboratory toxicology screenings with the dates collected and some reports. And I think one of them said ETG positive on 5/25. Was that a mistake?
Yeah, that's at the time, the person that was doing data entry from Northwest Lab to our ADCS reports that are documented, they looked at the 114 and they put it under ETG, which would not be correct because we wouldn't report a 114 as a positive ETG, only as the ETS, which is how the detailed report is listed.
So it says here, I'm looking at what you're saying, it says ETS positive and then it says ETG positive and then it goes over to say ETS 114.
Correct.
And you're saying you would not have reported the ETS there?
Right. Well, I would report the ETS off to the right, but under the ETG, it would still be negative. She should not have, the person who did the data should not have put positive on that end because it's an ETS that is positive, not the ETG.
And you think she was confusing that with the positive ETS somehow? Because
No, I think she was just I think she was rushing through the data.
And she did that also on the test for June 26th. Same thing. The ETS was positive, so she put positive for ETG. And then she did the same thing on June 11th. No, she didn't do it on June 11th. On June 11th, she has positive ETS and then she has the ETG negative.
Correct.
All right. And this is where Ms. Fisher got her data.
Correct.
And all of this is wrong. Those two are wrong.
Correct. And I believe I reached out to Ms. Fisher to let her know, to send her the corrections.
Okay. And so now we've just amended her reports to reflect that.
Your Honor, just for reference, and I was just briefly talking to Ms. Fisher here with regard to the correction. Ms. Fisher never received a correction from the lab. I provided her copies of the results that on January 28th through email after I spoke with her to inquire about why her report was showing 2 positive ETGs.
Oh,
She indicated that she was not aware of the post that I had the same copy that AP Rosen has tendered today. So
right, which is what I just got, which I only had the ADCS reports that were wrong. Okay. All right,
It's just one question.
sure.
Ms. Foster, the reports that we were talking about, are you sure that those are correct?
Absolutely. The 3 reports that I have from Northwest Lab are accurate.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so then we don't need Ms. Fisher. Okay, Ms. Fisher, you can be excused. Thank you.
I see people asking questions about ETG. It's the testing protocols that they use when people are coming in testing and giving urine and all that stuff. So they went over a lot of that in the beginning. So if you're just getting in here, that's why you don't understand the acronyms they're giving out. And somebody did make a point about her taking vacation. She's the only one to train. I mean, she might only have a staff of 3. I don't know. But it makes sense what you said.
Excuse me, and I know you're just getting ready to get started. How long are you all planning to go? Because it's 4:40. And I just want to know, because we got your expert that you plan on, because you're paying him to
correct, Your Honor.
be here today. So how long do you think this is
As long
going
as it
to?
takes, Your Honor.
No, we can't go that long.
Your Honor, I have to do my job. We've been waiting for this date, which the court's very well aware of. We're trying to make accommodations so that we could ensure Dr. Wagner's appearance today. Hopefully my follow-up questions to Ms. Foster won't take very long. I guess then it'll be a matter of.
Because we can't go past, I could go to 5:30.
Well, hopefully we could wrap it up by then, Judge. We'll have to see how it goes.
Because we got to lock the building and we have some rules in place that,
I understand, Judge. I understand.
okay.
I will remain as flexible as I need to.
Sure.
And I just want to get through as much as we can.
Okay,
All right.
go ahead.
Thank you. So Ms. Foster, you were explaining to what a gatekeeper was, and you testified that you be the person who reviews, to be administers and reviews tests and collections. You do the training, you train your staff. Basically, you're in charge of everything. Those are my words there to summarize. You're in charge of everything that happens there at your lab, correct?
Correct.
And so you're not Mr. Hudson's probation officer?
Yes.
Yes, you are?
No, I'm sorry. I thought you said you know his probation officer. No, I'm not his probation officer.
And you do not supervise him?
No, I do not.
You don't make determinations as to when someone has or has not violated probation?
Correct.
Your only job is to report lab results, correct?
That's right. My company's job is to test the client, to report those results when they're positive back to the referring agent.
So you don't make legal conclusions when someone's consumed alcohol, correct?
Correct.
What training have you had in testing urine samples for alcohol metabolites?
That's the toxicologist's job.
So none would be the answer.
Correct.
Are you certified in forensic toxicology?
No, I'm not.
Are you certified in laboratory science?
No, I'm not.
Did you personally perform the testing in this case?
No, I did not.
You've only reviewed results that were generated by laboratory instruments, correct?
Correct.
Your laboratory, you said tests urine samples for both ECG and ETS, correct?
Correct.
And is it actually your lab that does the testing?
No, it's Northwest Lab.
So your job really is to collect the sample and send it to a lab.
That's right. And it gets couriered by the lab.
That process?
Client comes in, once we have the sample, the tube has a tamper tape attached to the top of it. Then it goes into a bag with his signed chain of custody. When it gets to the lab, they go through the process to make sure that everything is correct. If there was one thing out of place that wasn't correct, the sample gets rejected.
How are the samples stored?
The samples are stored at the lab and they only keep them for about 3 weeks, but all of the determination and the results on interpreting the test results, according to Tamara, she keeps on file so that she can look at it any time.
Oh, don't worry. This is going somewhere.
Well, so my question is more specific to your facility. When a client comes in and provides a sample, you put it into a tube, correct?
Correct.
You put tamper-proof tape on, correct?
Correct.
You put it in a bag, correct?
Correct.
And in that bag, you put the client's information, correct?
Correct.
And there's a barcode that connects the sample to the client, correct?
Correct.
What do you do with the sample then? Do you set it on a counter? Do you put it in the fridge?
They're stored in a bag that the courier picks up with the dates on them that the samples were collected, the location that they came from, and then Northwest Lab picks that up and they have to take it back to Northwest Lab in Southville.
Are you putting multiple samples in a bag together?
No, everybody's sample is sealed in a bag by itself and then it's placed into a larger bag that the couriers pick up.
So that was my question. The individual samples of 5 different people go into 5 different bags for the courier or one bag for the courier?
They go into one bag, but each bag is individually sealed.
And they're not stored in any temperature controlled room?
It's in a room that's cool. The samples are picked up every day.
Is it temperature controlled?
Yes.
How is the temperature controlled?
In the Detroit location, we actually have analyzer, and those samples we have frozen. So once we have any positives, we keep those for, if it's opiates, we can keep those for 60 days. If it's marijuana, we only keep it for 30. And then the people that are having screens, we have to reach out to the court to determine if they want to have a confirmation or not. If the probation agent requires a confirmation, then those samples are pulled with the chain of custody that the client signs while they're in our office for the screen test. And that information is then shipped through the courier back to Northwest Lab.
Okay, now I'm confused because a minute ago you said that the samples are put into a bag and picked up every day. However, you just said that they're frozen and kept in case they need further testing. So
but there are 2 different types of tests. The tests that go to Northwest Lab get picked up during every day. The samples that we run on our in-house analyzer, which is the same kind of machine that Northwest Lab uses, we don't have the ability to do a confirmation. So we're not running any LCMS testing. So those are kept frozen for anyone that triggers a positive.
So we're talking specifically about the alcohol testing here.
Correct. So in my office, we don't run ETGs on our in-house analyzer. All of those samples go directly to Northwest Lab.
And you said the samples are picked up daily.
Correct.
Approximately how long from the time a sample is received until it's tested? Approximately what does that time frame look like?
Usually anywhere between 48 and 72 hours.
You indicated Northwest Labs test samples for both ETG and ETS, correct?
Correct.
And both metabolites are typically produced together after alcohol consumption, is that correct?
Correct.
And the cutoff for ETG in this case is 200 nanograms per milliliter, correct?
Correct.
You said earlier that the cutoff for ETS was 100 nanograms per milliliter. Do you recall that?
Yes.
But Northwest report actually shows that the cutoff is 50 nanograms per milliliter. Why is that?
Because they have a lower cutoff that I did mention earlier because of the other facilities that they do testing for. But we only report positives that meet the SAMHSA cutoff of either 500 nanograms or 100 nanograms for ETS.
So 200 nanograms and 50 nanograms are both considered low cutoffs, correct?
Correct.
Lower cutoff increases sensitivity, correct?
That's correct.
It decreases specificity, though, doesn't it?
That part I'd have to ask the toxicologist. I'd have to ask Tamara. So when I talk to her, I go by exactly what she tells me.
So I just want to briefly review, Ms. Foster. On May 25th, the ETG was negative, but the ETS was 114, correct?
Correct.
June 11th, the ETG was negative, but the ETS was 235, correct?
Correct.
On June 26th, the ETG was again negative, but the ETS was 215.
Correct.
So on all three occasions, the ETG did not meet the lab's 200 nanogram per milliliter threshold.
Correct. But again, I only report positive ETGs that meet 500 nanograms and above.
The only analyte reported was ETS.
That's correct.
And there was no test in this period with both ETG and ETS that were both positive.
That's correct.
Ms. Foster, can you explain how the June 11th and June 26th tests have an ETS of over 200 nanograms per milliliter, but the ETG was negative despite its 200 nanogram cutoff?
Because it's not uncommon to have a negative ETG and a positive ETS. It's actually quite common.
Can we agree 215 is more than 200?
Yes.
Can we agree 235 is more than 200?
Correct, but they're not using that as a cutoff. We're going by the 100 nanogram cutoff for ETS.
This lab to test for ETG and ETS on every sample.
This lab only reports the ETS is positive if the ETG is negative because the ETS is the best test.
That wasn't my question, Ms. Foster. My question was, does Northwest Lab routinely test for both ETG and ETS on every sample?
Every sample that we send in for ETG and ETS is what they test for. Correct.
So testing on ETS occurs regardless of what the results of the ETG is.
The Northwest Lab, the toxicologist, does not report any positive ETG unless it reaches the SAMHSA cutoff of 500 or more.
Again, Ms. Foster, that was not my question.
You rephrase it. Maybe I'm not
Lab,
understanding.
Northwest Labs tests for ETS regardless of whether the ETG was positive or negative, correct?
Correct.
ETG and ETS are both metabolites that are formed when alcohol is metabolized, correct?
Correct.
In most cases where alcohol is consumed, both metabolites appear in the urine, correct?
Correct.
ETG is typically present in higher concentrations than in ETS, correct?
Correct.
So if someone has an ETS about 50 nanograms per milliliter, but an ETG below 200 nanograms per milliliter, that pattern is not the typical result expected from beverage consumption, correct?
Not according to the conversation that I've had with the lab, no.
It reports numbers, but it can't determine whether someone consumes alcohol, correct?
According to the toxicologist, anyone that triggers an ETS above the 100 nanograms is what they report.
Ms. Foster, you're not answering my question, but I'm gonna move on.
Oh, Lord.
The laboratory cannot distinguish between incidental exposure and drinking, can they?
According to the toxicologist, they can if it triggers a positive ETS above.
And the lab cannot determine the source of timing on an exposure, can they?
I don't know.
So while an ETS may be above the cutoff, a negative ETG raises questions about whether alcohol was actually consumed, correct?
Not according to the toxicologist that I've worked with over the last 27 years, no.
But it's not, but you don't have an opinion on it yourself.
From the testing that we've done over the years, yeah, I can. Because I've seen plenty of ETGs that are positive above the cutoff that they're using, and the ETS is negative.
Again,
Which is
you're interpreting data, correct?
correct, according to the training that I've had with the different toxicologists, correct.
Thank you. To explain how a sample can show a positive ETS while the ETG is negative.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Are you able to explain how a sample could show positive ETS but negative ETG?
According to my training, an ETG is more fragile than ETS because it's a different methodology. And it's not uncommon for the ETG to fall below the cutoff and an ETS not be below the cutoff.
You're not a doctor, are you, Ms. Foster?
Absolutely not.
We've established you're not a toxicologist,
That's correct.
and you're not board certified as a clinical expert in interpreting alcohol biomarkers.
That's correct.
Your expertise is limited to lab procedures, handling, and test reporting.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
I'm just gonna object because this witness has already been tendered and received as an expert in drug and alcohol testing by the court.
Which is what she just asked her. And she said, yeah, that's what I do. So I mean, we're just corroborating what she's already said.
Qualified to interpret what could cause an ETS above 200 nanogram per milliliter while an ETG was negative beyond lab stability, bacterial influence, or testing procedure, correct?
Correct.
You are not qualified?
Correct.
That's correct. Without consulting with the toxicologist, I'm not qualified.
And as far as you're aware, the specimens met validity criteria,
That's correct.
and a valid specimen does not automatically mean alcohol beverage consumption, correct?
Again, I'd have to refer back to my conversation with the toxicologist as to what it is that I report.
Stated earlier that people have the opportunity to provide evidence that could assist in interpreting the data, correct?
Correct.
Wouldn't that require some sort of notice to a defendant who has tested positive?
No, it's my job to report the results to the agency. And at that time, then we report the results to the agency. And once the probation officer reaches out to me with any questions, then I go back to the toxicologist.
So you don't personally notify the client or the defendant?
I'm sorry, you see me walking outside, about to close here.
She's walking outside of the court. She's saying the hips are there.
The Novi court is I'm outside.
It closed. She had to leave.
I understand, Judge.
We're still here though.
Breaking that.
Right.
Judge ready to
For
go.
me to continue, Ms. Foster.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So you don't contact the client or the defendants in cases to make them aware that they have a positive test, correct?
I only do it for specific courts. Most courts prefer to be the person that evaluates the test results with the client, and then they will instruct the client or me what action needs to be followed.
What is that policy or procedure here in your interactions with the Southfield District Court?
I send it to the probation officer first.
And then do you follow up with the client or the defendant?
Once the probation officer tells me to, yes.
Did Ms. Fisher ask you to follow up with Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, well, actually, Mr. Hudson is the person who asked me to follow up because the 2 prior tests were sent to Mrs. Fisher, but the 26th is the date that he didn't recall even reporting that day. And once he gave me the list of ingredients or things that he had taken during COVID, is when he followed up to say, he reached back out to say, you know what, I had to check my calendar. He talked to his fiance, and that I was correct. He did test that day.
And that you're referencing the email where he sent the list of medications?
Correct.
Ms. Foster, you testified earlier that there was some apparent mistake with regard to data on the report provided to Ms. Fisher. Do you recall?
Yes.
Did you make mistakes at work, Ms. Fisher? Or Foster? Sorry.
I didn't make that mistake. Again, that was my data person, and she stopped doing data when I discovered that she kept putting it in the wrong spot.
Have you made mistakes at work, Ms. Foster?
Excuse me?
Have you made mistakes at work?
Oh, Lord.
Every once in a while, yes, we make mistakes. I think everybody makes a mistake every once in a while, but
I can agree.
yes, I've made mistakes. And when I make them, I alert the agency for the correction.
Did you make a mistake on something in this case with Mr. Hudson?
No, I did not.
You didn't email him and ask him to come back in to re-sign paperwork that he was given the wrong copy of for a different person?
Well, no, he was given a copy. It's his job to make sure that the chain of custody has his name on it, his date of birth, and his information and his signature. So when I got the notice that the sample was rejected by Northwest Lab, I reached out to him, had him come back in, didn't charge him since the error was both his and ours, and did another collection.
Ms. Foster, can you see your screen?
Yes.
And do you see a printout, the email from Gmail?
Correct.
And your email address is at mi.foster@comcast.net.
That's the email address that I use for the job, yes.
In this email here, can you read it on your phone, or is the font too small?
It's kind of too small.
It's the area is your email address to 2025 at 12:35 p.m. It states, Mr. Hudson, please see the attached copy from June 26th. I also need you to report this afternoon or tomorrow morning. The order you signed was for the other mail that was in the same time as you on 16th. No
Correct.
cost to you. Moving forward, always confirm your location on the top of the roster. So my question is, Ms. Foster, have you made mistakes in this case?
Again, I did not make that mistake. That was a mistake in the form that was made. Mr. Hudson and the client that was in at the same time, both of them were waiting to be tested, and they were engaging in conversation, and I think that's how they mixed things up. The other client signed the correct form. His test was none. Mr. Hudson did not.
So Mr. Lucian's responsible for being the gatekeeper on his test.
He's not responsible for being the gatekeeper, but he is responsible to pay attention that the information on the form is his. The form, the chain of custody clearly states that he's aware that that's his sample that's been collected, and that he agrees his information since March of last year.
I don't have any further questions for this witness here.
Do you have some more questions?
I think the court has a fair understanding of the differences between ETG and ETS, but just for one question, Ms. Foster, you're basing your opinion on the ETS results, correct?
Correct.
And that's the more specific test?
Correct, as the most specific test.
That's the most accurate test?
That's correct.
And there was no mistake with the ETS results for each of these incidents?
According to the toxicologist, no mistake for those 3 tests.
And all 3 of those tests show that the defendant had been drinking alcohol on those dates?
According to the toxicologist, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Ms. Foster, I think we're all set with you. I appreciate you staying until you got kicked out of the district court over there. Appreciate that.
Have Mr. Wagner testify, or are we gonna come back?
So I'm gonna release her. And how long is he gonna be?
I'd like her to listen to his testimony.
Well, wait a minute. We might need you to listen. How
Okay.
long is he supposed to be, Miss? How long you gonna?
Judge, it's really not very long at all. I mean, that took me 20 minutes,
Okay.
so 20.
In that case, Miss Foster, we want you to listen in to whatever the other person is going to be testifying to, in
Okay.
case we need you to follow up, rebut, or explain your view of something that he said.
Okay.
So, are you trying to make your way to your vehicle right now?
No, I'm waiting for my ride to get here.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I'm okay.
So you can hear okay outside there? Okay.
Yes, yes, I can.
All right, this the part y'all waiting for.
So then we'll call the defense witness. Who's that?
John, do you have to make the, call, I'm sorry, Judge.
Mr. Michael Wagner.
Mike Wagner, thank you.
Okay, like the judge. Okay, Dr. Wagner, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you very much.
Good evening, Dr. Wagner. Thanks for being with us so long here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I got, as before with the other witness, if you cannot hear me, please just let me know. I'm happy to repeat any question.
Okay.
Could you please state your full name and your credentials for the record?
Michael Albert Wagner, spelling of the last name Wagner. Credentials, I am currently the Chief Toxicologist, West Virginia Office of Medical Examiner's Office. Prior to that, I was faculty at Indiana University School of Medicine, Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine, as well as the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology. I was faculty there and on staff for 6 years. Also the state toxicologist during that time period. Then I moved to Chicago, became a medical director of a laboratory where we did testing for physicians, clinical testing, and also the court probation monitoring. And so I've had up to 25 plus years in the clinical and forensic toxicology area of science and expertise in both testing, developing testing, and offering education to physicians, medical students, and the court systems.
Yeah,
This is what you wanted, and this is what you got.
and you're board certified or otherwise credentialed in toxicology, correct?
Yes, I have a fellowship in the American Board of Forensic Toxicology.
Dang.
Do you have experience analyzing biological samples for alcohol and other substances?
Yes,
Have you previously provided expert testimony regarding alcohol testing?
yes.
Approximately how many times?
Over 200 plus times I've testified
Your
in
Honor,
various aspects of toxicology and interpretations.
Your Honor, it's my understanding that people intend to stipulate to Dr. Wagner being admitted as an expert in toxicology.
Is that true?
Yes.
All right, so we can qualify him as an expert in toxicology. And we're talking about specifically alcohol in this instance?
Dr. Wagner, can you see on the screen there, this document? Titled
Yes, I
Expert
can.
Witness Disclosure?
Yes, I can see.
And- Thank you. And what is this?
That's an expert witness disclosure requested through a company that I work with that is involved in the case that you reached out to for assistance in interpretation of laboratory results.
And that company is Spectrum Forensics, correct?
Correct.
Is this a true and accurate representation of your opinions in this case?
It does. It's a representation of my opinion, correct?
And there were attachments to your report, correct, Dr. Wagner?
Yes, so that those attachments were reference articles as well as the documentations that you were able to provide me with his attendance at various AANA meetings. In addition, the testing that he conducted throughout the time period for breath testing, multiple random tests throughout the day. Also the urine drug testing that was analyzed at Northwest Labs. Those results.
And do you see those attachments here on the screen?
Yeah, you're scrolling through them.
And did that appear to be a true and accurate representation of the information that you relied upon when formulating your opinion and report?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes. It's 90 pages.
It's about 95, Judge. The attachment is 90 pages. The report is 5. AP Roosevelt has seen a copy of it. I'm tendering it to you as defendants. It's marked as Defendants Exhibit 2.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the attachments to the extent that they're admitted for their truth. I understand that this expert relied upon these documents, but they have not been authenticated or independently verified. I don't know who filled this out. These AA logs, I don't know who collected them. I don't know why they were started. I'm fine with them being admitted for the specific purpose that this expert relied upon them, but I would ask the court just to consider them only for that purpose.
Well, Your Honor, first of all,
Okay, well, if I'm going to look at him from the standpoint of he relied on them, but you don't want me to rely upon them as to whether or not they're truly what they are?
That's correct, Your Honor. Unless the defense has a witness that would be able to identify who filled these forms out. All we know is that defense counsel provided them to the defense hired expert.
Aren't some of these things, the Northwest Lab?
some are lab reports, Judge. Some are the ordinance records that are furnished to Ms. Fisher every month.
We let Ms. Fisher go. So if we want to have her clarify that this is the stuff she received every month as evidence of his attendance at AA, I mean, I guess we could do that. It's hearsay, because we're never gonna know who the people were that signed these things. It's the only people that could probably really say what it is, other than Mr. Hudson himself. There's a vibe here.
Flexible if you judge want to take judicial notice. I personally don't know how these are collected, when they come in, if they come in all at one time. It looks like it was all the same pen, all the same handwriting. I just have no knowledge on how this sort of form works, so.
The court may take judicial notice of its own file to find record of the AA logs. The test had already.
Right, well, you know what? It would be the probation file, which I don't see. So, other than that, if Miss Fisher says this is what she received and this is what she gets,
Did they get them all at one time, or is this?
it varies. I know that for a fact. Sometimes somebody comes in with 3 months worth of things and says, here's what I've been doing for the last 3 months. Here's what I did the last couple of weeks. So I do know it varies. And it's the same. I don't know who wrote this. It could be Mr. Hudson wrote it, and the person usually signs off on it. But I don't know. I can't say for sure.
Just with those understandings that you just placed on the record, I'm comfortable with these documents being admitted, just knowing that sometimes these are admitted all at once and sometimes they're admitted across the span of weeks. And that the court, and there's no evidence to say who filled these out.
There's no evidence to support that they're not accurate, Judge. In fact, if Mr. Hudson was not compliant with AA attendance, we would see that on the probation report.
Yeah, and you would have to ask Ms. Fisher, does she confirm who signed what at which time, other than looking at the document itself? Because I don't know what they do to confirm, if they call or they check the meeting. And, you know, I'm no handwriting expert. Some of them look the same, others of them don't.
Expert toxicologists, information and opinions through third party by way of hearsay, then the court can rely upon the documentation that was furnished to Dr. Wagner.
I did say it's a vibe hearing, so it's like we don't have to have the people who signed it to tell us what it is per se, because it is hearsay. The only thing we do know is Northwest reports, assumingly, but that's hearsay too. But we heard from Miss Foster that, you know, those were the reports she got. Still hearsay, it's a third party report. So, yeah, I'll accept them. Just with the understanding of this is a VOP hearing. It's not a trial per se. And we can accept this as hearsay testimony. All right, and this is what he relied on. Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Raymond, do you have with you a copy of your report and the attachment for reference to read it?
Yeah, I have a copy.
The report and the attachments and evidence, I didn't, we got into some discussion there, so are they being admitted?
Yeah, exhibit number 2 is admitted. That's the report that he looked at.
Thank
And
you.
what else you need?
That's it.
Okay.
The report and its attachments charges the, exemption. It was going to be the CP that we're.
No, that's right. I just.
We don't have a 1 for my purpose.
We have people 1 through 4 in defense too.
Yes.
If you're under this, the need to have the CBN copies was that I didn't think so, Judge. All right, so Dr. Wagner, what materials did you review in informing your opinions?
The materials I used are the materials that you were able to provide for me, some of them. Obviously, the testing from the laboratory, the multiple breath tests conducted per day and over the course of the time from his probation to beyond the probation, and of course covering the 3 days that we're discussing here in court. I also reviewed the literature to see what were the standard guidelines for appropriate interpretations of ETG and ETS results. And of course, laboratory testing protocols and procedures.
And did you rely on all of, I'm sorry, strike that. You referenced these materials in your report, correct?
Yes,
And did you overhear the testimony of the lab technician today?
I did.
Explain the difference between ETG and ETS in urine testing.
So ETG and ETS are 2 very minor metabolites for alcohol consumption. The ETG is ethylene glucuronide, which is a sugar molecule that is just attached to the smallest amount of ethanol that might still be in the system, usually in the urine. And ETS is the ethylene or ethanol molecule with a sulfur group attached to it. And that's what we call a phase 1 metabolism, where the body is trying to help excrete and get rid of ethanol. Most of the rest of the ethanol is usually metabolized and broken down into carbon dioxide and water. But usually you'll have some ethanol that you'll breathe out through your breath. You'll have ethanol that you breathe out and sweat out through your sweat glands. And of course, you can excrete it through your urine. And so these 2 metabolites are readily detectable in the urine.
In typical ethanol consumption, what pattern would you expect for ETG and ETS?
The most common detection is really seeing both ETG and ETS together. That's the most common metabolic distribution of ethanol into the urine. And those 2 processes and those 2 analytes typically show up together. You are correct. I did hear earlier that ETG is typically in higher concentrations than ETS. And there is advantages and disadvantages to testing for both or one of each. Our laboratory always tested for both, as it sounds like this Northwest lab did as well. They run a panel that tests for both.
Are you aware of circumstances where ETS is positive, ETG is negative?
Yes, there are certain processes that can affect that. Some of them are genetic, where people just tend to sulfonate ethanol and not really glucuronidate the ethanol, so you don't see the ETG. There are certain types of exposures that can cause the ETG to deteriorate and conversely also be produced under certain conditions. And then there are certain types of exposures through hand sanitizers and mouth wash and medicines that contain ethanol, all of those which can produce ETS only and not ETG. And those are abundant in the literature. There are tests that have done. I have conducted those tests myself on individuals. And so there are certain circumstances where you will see ETS and you will not see ETG produced. The literature also has written case articles where people have certain microbial processes going on in the intestine and in the gut that cause ETS to be detected out to 60 plus days with no ETG being detected. And there's a case that I included in my discovery where this lady was kept on a medical ward for 60 days and she continued to test positive for ETS only and no exposure to alcohol. So there are metabolic processes that we don't fully understand yet that are associated with the interpretation of this test. And there are a lot of warnings that go on with this test as well. I heard earlier that the witness, I think her name was Mrs. Foster, right? If I correct?
That's correct.
She had invoked a researcher, and we all know Dr. Gregory Skipper. I know Dr. Skipper very well professionally. And he has constantly written numerous articles about the caution of interpreting these tests and the risk of interpreting false positives. Now, analytically, we have to determine between what is a false positive and what is a false positive interpretation. The test may accurately analytically identify ETG and or ETS, but how you interpret those results can lead you down a false interpretation if you don't have supportive information available. For example, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse, NIAA, cautions never using an ETS alone to interpret alcohol consumption. You can have alcohol exposure in some fashion, but it does not indicate alcohol consumption. The same thing with SAMHSA. SAMHSA went through an evolution from the early 2000s all the way up to now, changing various cutoff levels because they initially had the levels cut off too low and laboratory and toxicologists were incorrectly identifying alcohol consumption when in truth, the test was indicating alcohol exposure, right? And so that's why I think even Mrs. Foster had indicated that they use a 500 cutoff and a 100 cutoff because that raises the level of those cutoffs to try and dampen down the misinterpretation of alcohol consumption versus alcohol exposure. So, and that's what my lab did too. We used a 500 and a 100 cutoff. So I'm okay with that. And I think the literature kind of supports that that's a generally safe area to be. But there's another thing that this laboratory didn't do, which is not consistent with reporting guidelines of results. Typically, if you see in my table that I reported in my disclosure, it's table number 1, and I outline the collection dates. I also indicate from the time 18 days out from the time it's collected, like the windows of days of collections. But if we just focus on column where it says ETS and it says 50, so that's the Northwest cutoff, right? And then they have a result that was reported as 114, 235, and 215.
I didn't show this because his name and birth date and age is all over this paperwork.
So those are the raw aqueous results. When I say aqueous, I mean the liquid results in the urine that were reported out of this laboratory. Proper guideline says that you should also record the creatinine. And then the next column where it says CRE, you have a series of numbers, 180, 212, 172. Those represent creatinine, which is a protein that is spilled out in your urine on a daily basis. And we use that result to determine whether an individual has produced a valid urine sample. And there's certain ranges that certain labs will use, and Northwest has a range of 20 to 400. So each one of these samples seems to be a valid sample, i.e. someone wasn't drinking a whole lot of water to try and dilute their sample so they could get a negative result. In addition, we look at the specific gravity and the pH as other valid indicators as to whether or not the urine sample is valid. And in all three cases, they look valid. That's great. But if we go back to now the column where we have ETS labeled as 50 nanograms per ml, you'll have in parentheses a normalized result. And that normalized result is correcting the final result of the urine, not the final, but the aqueous result, which is the 114, and normalizing it to the amount of creatinine in the urine. And by doing that, it adjusts from day to day because we don't spit out the same amount of creatinine in our urine from day to day or from urine to urine within the same day, the intra-urine sample given versus the inter-urine sample given. And if you make that appropriate correction, right, you can see in parentheses that 63 nanograms per ml is below that cutoff of 50. You can see that the 235 now gets down to 110. And you can see that the 215 drops down to 125, right? And this step that I'm doing right now is one of the major steps that Dr. Gregory Skipper used to emphasize when people would use these tests to determine whether they were exposed to alcohol or exposed to drinking alcohol. And he has lectured multiple times and written multiple articles about the false positive interpretations that are associated and the cautions that need to be used when interpreting these results. And so you can see these results all get corrected, and normally they're getting reduced because the creatinine is typically in higher concentration, right? And so you can see that they drop off. And the first one now has dropped below a reportable limit. The second one drops down to 110, and the third one is 125. Something else that hasn't been considered in this is the laboratory isn't reporting the standard deviation of each of their tests, meaning that no result is 100%, 110, or 125. There's usually a plus or minus value, just like in breath testing or blood alcohol testing. When you have to testify in court, the laboratory has to report a CV, a variance, a plus and minus range of how accurate that result is. And I guarantee you, if you look at this laboratory, these results are going to have a variance somewhere between 5% and 20%. And if it's, say, the high end of 20%, well, that 110 drops down to 88, and the 125 drops down to 100. So this is just looking at the results from a purely analytical point of view and following appropriate guidelines for reporting a final result, right? And those are guidelines that are both medically required and medical legally required. So we get to that point. Am I okay with the court to continue on, or do we want to stop? And
Yeah, I think we want a question.
Okay.
So, Dr. Wagner, I guess that was a lot of science. Thank you for that.
Well, he's talking so well about everything. They're probably stuck in listening to the story.
I think most of us are probably a little foggy from all of that. Bottom line, Dr. Wagner, based on the information that you have here with this data scientifically, can these results be utilized to indicate with certainty that Mr. Hudson consumed an alcohol beverage?
No, I could say that this is not consistent with alcohol consumption. It could be, and in my disclosure, I disclose it could be alcohol exposure, but we don't know what that is. It could be something consumed by food, a beverage that air quote, is not an alcohol beverage. Or it could be, I've done it, you know, we talked about COVID earlier. Individuals where I, you know, multiply, we in the medical community also had to do some monitoring of nurses, you know, who might have been part of a medical legal compliance. And when they were testing and washing their hands with alcohol throughout the day, taking care of patient to patient, and the criteria is to go in and come out and wash your hands with alcohol gel, they tested positive for ETS and not ETG. So we know it happens, right? And so those situations can occur. There could
Well, we better stop using hand sanitizer.
have been something that this individual ate that, you know, disrupted, you know, his system for a while, for a very short while. And supporting all of this, riding in parallel, as you mentioned earlier, and I heard testimony to this, is he was testing multiple times a day, breath testing, randomly. He tested one time, I counted 22 times in a single day. There's no way an individual could have consumed an alcohol drink and then passed you know, a 0 or negative breath test and then produced a positive urine test, right? So I think, you know, he was doing everything he could possibly compliant with the court testing. And this is also a recommendation that people who do ETG testing for probation monitoring and medical legal issues is to have a secondary test that can corroborate the initial test. He was doing that. In addition to that, he was compliant with his AA meetings, never missed an AA meeting, never missed a breath test, never, and had these two very narrow scoped aberrant time points when he tested positive that do not indicate on their own that this is alcohol consumption. And that is consistent with SAMHSA, you know, and, you know, just substance abuse and mental health administration also recommends using additional testing. And so just in summarizing, he was doing everything compliant that he could. We are taking the test results and properly adjusting them according to medical legal guidelines and medical guidelines. And literature itself will indicate that there are plenty of situations, both from a lecture standpoint and from case reports, that individuals can test positive for ETG and not ETS and not be culpable of drinking alcohol, liquor, producing those results.
So when you're talking about the breath test, are you referring to the attachments to your report where there's photos seen of Mr. Hudson blowing into a device?
Correct.
Are you familiar with an interlock device?
I am.
Okay, how does an interlock device work?
Interlock device is a breath test device that measures breath alcohol, like a portable breath test and or like a police officer's breath testing device. I used to actually run, I was a assistant laboratory director and ran all of breath testing, alcohol and toxicology testing for the state of New Hampshire and the state of Indiana. And so I oversaw 700 certifications and trainings of breath officers, and our laboratory conducted breath testing device compliance maintenance on all of the police department's testing. So I know how they work very well. And in this particular case, what separates it from those other devices is it has a picture. It takes a picture of you while you're testing as a part of the validity that the individual testing is the individual that's supposed to be testing and taking the producing the breath result.
You know, why would that report show some photos of Mr. Hudson, but not all?
I don't know. I cannot answer that.
You reviewed the results of the report, correct?
Yes, I reviewed the results of the report.
and you testified that there was no indication that he had a single positive that was conducted on his interview.
Correct.
I think that's Ms. Foster's background news charge.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Dr. Wagner, you have the opportunity to hear the testimony of Ms. Foster. Based on what you've heard today, does any information she provided to the court change your opinion regarding this case and the results?
I am going to say that I would have made some corrections and some guideline requirements that would support a counter narrative to her testimony, supported by the scientific literature, and maybe add some opportunities for education.
And briefly, what would some of those corrections or guidelines be?
Well, the medical toxicologist making the result or assisting her in the interpretation, I think, was misguided or ill-informed or not up to date on the literature, because I can tell you that even the government guidelines of NIH, NIAA, and SAMHSA tell you to not rely on a single ETG test alone, or even if a single result, or if you have it in tandem here, that other test results to support and other qualitative data to indicate whether or not the alcohol result is indicative of drinking or exposure.
There were 3 entities that you just referenced using initials. Could you give us the full name of those entities?
Yeah, I think in my report up at the top, I indicate NIA, which is the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And then NIH is National Institute of Health. And then SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Association. SAMHSA, is part of the group that helps establish testing. So SAMHSA Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. Those are all 3 entities that kind of have opportunities to provide guidelines for testing and for interpreting tests and working with addiction and other areas of mental health.
Dr. Wagner, considering all the information, what is your overall conclusion regarding Mr. Hudson's alleged alcohol consumption from May 25th of 2025 to June 26th, 2025?
My interpretation is that the individual had an alcohol event exposure, but I cannot interpret that result or those results as alcohol consumption.
Can anyone interpret that as alcohol consumption accurately?
Not if they follow the
Back to that
guidelines.
question, I know there's no rules of evidence applicable, but whether anyone can make that interpretation is so broad that I think the court should.
Yeah, how would he know what anyone
Well,
can? You can ask him what he said, and I think you did.
in the field, he's done testing, he's conferred with other toxicologists and other professionals in his line of work. I think it's fair to say that he could have an opinion as to whether or not that could realistically be done by anyone.
I think the court is correct that it should be limited to his own opinion based on his own education, knowledge, training, and experience.
Yeah, I mean, unless you can lay some kind of foundation that, he's going through the gamut of training that he could testify to any possible result that anybody else could ever see. I guess you could have him answer it. But other than that, I think we really want to rely on what his knowledge and expertise here is. And
Thank you, Judge.
he's told us.
Dr. Wagner, is your opinion regarding Mr. Hudson and the lack of ability to interpret this as alcohol consumption being expressed with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
Could your conclusion change if there was new evidence that was introduced?
I could change my opinion if new evidence was introduced.
Based on the information before you, though, your conclusion is we cannot say with certainty it was alcohol consumption that caused the positive ETS.
That's my conclusion.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
He said they did an additional evaluation to determine, using the creatinine level to determine if it was exposure and not
Can
consumption.
we ask Ms. Foster to mute herself? I don't know.
Hey, Ms. Foster, you need to put on mute. I can put her on mute. She can talk, I'll just mute her. Okay, there she goes. All right, cross exam.
Can we put Mr. Wagner, Dr. Wagner back on the screen?
Sorry.
She has to shut it off. I don't know if I can shut it off.
I'm looking at the document too. I just want to look at them once I get to them. Dr. Wagner, my name's Brittany Rosenau. I'm the assistant prosecutor. I'm sure you're familiar with this process. I'm just gonna ask you some questions. So you've never met Mr. Hudson in person, true?
Correct.
Have you ever talked to Mr. Hudson?
No,
You've never spoken one word or heard one word directly from Mr. Hudson?
correct.
You've only gotten all of the information about this case from Ms. Smith, his attorney.
Correct.
And all of the documents that you've reviewed and relied upon, as far as Mr. Hudson's lab results and AA records and testing records, that was also provided to you by his attorney.
Another green.
Correct.
You have no independent knowledge about the authenticity of, say, the AA records, correct?
Correct.
Those were just provided to you.
Correct.
And you have no independent knowledge for the breath testing instrument records, is that correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree with me that there are photographs on these records from the dates of June 24th and later, from June 24th to June 27th. For 3 days, there are photographs, is that correct?
I believe so. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll trust your assessment.
And you would agree with me that from the time of June 24th at 10:52 a.m., going back in time until he started this testing, there's no photograph of Mr. Hudson.
There were definitely a series of sample submissions that were not photographed.
And you don't know if that was actually Mr. Hudson blowing into that instrument, correct?
In those absent photos, correct.
And again, you're just relying on these documents for what they're worth, for what they appear to be.
Correct.
And you're being paid to give your opinion testimony here today, isn't that true?
I am.
And paid a substantial amount, as I understand it, right?
Objection, lack of accommodation, lack
Withdraw.
of knowledge.
Okay, Thane, go ahead.
Now, when you testified on direct, you indicated that it was abundant in literature that the ETS can be affected by extraneous alcohol. Was that your testimony?
No, what I said is that it can be produced without ETG. And there can be alternative explanations other than alcohol consumption.
Okay, so by it, you mean ETS can be produced without ETG.
Correct.
And you spoke about an article that you read one time involving a medical ward where a lady tested positive for ETS only, even though she was in a medical ward, right?
Yes. Well, she started out prior to that being monitored and compliant. But yes, eventually they moved her to a medical ward to continue monitoring.
But you didn't attach that to your opinion, true?
It's actually the article, I referenced it in my disclosure. I'm pretty sure I included it.
You provide a copy of that?
I provided the reference and it's accessible through the web. All you have to do is click on it. It's an open access article. It's at the very end on page 4. It says persistent urinary ethanol sulfate in the absence of urinary ethanol glucuronide.
Okay, so that I see it as page 5. It's reference number 2.
Correct.
Okay. Correct?
That's nothing I have, right? Or is,
Page 5.
Item number 2 is no reference.
We don't have the actual article, it's just a, I guess, a clickable link.
oh, okay.
Reference notation.
Got it.
Published in 2020, am I understanding that correctly?
2020 JAT, yep.
And what was the cutoff used for the ETS in that article?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I know that the individual, if it was 50 or 100, it might have been one of the two, but this individual tested exceedingly elevated above those values. I mean, it wasn't just barely over the values. It was, I think she had, I don't want to misquote the article, but several hundred nanograms of ETS present.
That's what you think, or that's what it says? Because I can't see the article from the papers that I have in front of me.
Yeah, I remember it being that this individual had consistently multiple tests that were hundreds of nanograms over the cutoff.
A question. In that particular case you're talking about, have you ever heard of anything called auto brewery syndrome? Is
Very
that
familiar.
what they're is that
No.
what they're talking about there?
No,
Okay.
so auto brewery syndrome is a unique process in where an individual, because of the microbes that exist in their gut,
In the gut.
and if they eat a lot of carbohydrates, that's the sugar, right? So of course, to make alcohol, you need yeast or bacteria and sugar to produce the alcohol. And so certain people genetically have a microbiome that can produce enough alcohol to get up to an 04, 05, even,
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen an 08, but they don't get up to a 0.4, let's put it that way, right? But they can become intoxicated, right? And so this individual.
I'm just gonna direct you back to my questions
Sorry.
here.
Well, I asked a question, so I would like him to finish my answer just because I
Right.
asked because I wondered if this was the same. He said no, but I was kind of liking to hear the rest of his explanation of what it was.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, she went too far.
sorry.
So-
Just to tie the two incidents together, they both require a microbiome. And in this article that I'm quoting, they haven't figured out the mechanism. They're assuming she had some surgery and there may be an alteration in her microbiome that caused this ETS to be produced. We don't know. There was not a conclusion other than the fact that it's possible, right? And so it's just highlighting the susceptibility of these tests being misinterpreted without a fully looking at the background of the patient or the subject, right? Is what I'm trying to emphasize.
Can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Over the course of your career, though, Dr. Wagner, how many instances like this is described? I guess we'll talk about the brewery first. And I know I'm not saying that correct.
Auto brewery.
Auto brewery.
Yeah.
How many cases have you seen personally as a toxicologist where auto brewery is something that's happening with one of the people that you're testing?
Honestly, I don't think I personally have had one. I've obviously come across it through my education and the literature, but I don't think I've ever come across a patient that's had it.
And how many patients have you treated over the course of your years?
Well, so I want to set the record straight. I'm a PhD, right? So I do all the testing. It's the physicians that I supply these results to and supply the interpretation for. So if a patient happened to have it, I would expect that engagement between myself and the physicians to indicate a situation like that as possible. And it could, if for facts that we continued, say, down the road where an individual kept testing positive for breath test results and positive in his urine, but insisted he didn't drink. And then we'd probably put him in a closed ward or put him in a monitoring device, or hopefully say he goes to jail, right? Has no access to drugs or alcohol, and we test him there. And then we can kind of verify his own self-disclosure versus what the analytical results are producing, right? So we would use certain mechanisms to help us out.
I asked the question because I'm very familiar with it because I ran across the issue with a defendant repeatedly with this medical issue allegedly, but they couldn't find an expert to testify on it. So that was an issue. That's the only reason I asked. And I
There's a way
thought
to
this
te-
might, yeah, I
there is a
thought
way
this
to
might have
test
been
for that.
similar, but it's a little bit different.
You can test for that if you do some
The
microbiology
auto
testing.
brewery, if
Yeah.
the individual has an auto brewery, whatever the terminology is,
Autobrewery syndrome.
would they consistently have positive tests?
They would test positive, but they should also test positive on the breath test
Okay.
because they produce that much.
Clear with Mr. Hudson, that auto brewery is not an issue because,
Breath test devices were all negative.
Yeah.
so you're agreeing with me?
Your Honor, there was never anything put forth before this court that was the potential issue here.
Right, I put it for her. So she's just qualifying that it can't be an issue. So, yeah. And what he was saying, there could be something in the microbiome that would cause this extra sulfate or whatever in certain people, I guess, I don't know, hereditarily or something happened during an operation to cause it to generate more of it, but that's different than the auto brewery syndrome. So, but highlighting what he was saying, if I heard him right, we just don't want to rely 100% on these tests because there could be other reasons. That's kind of what I heard. So go ahead.
Thank you. And just Dr. Wagner, just very briefly, you'd agree with me that the circumstances that were present for the individual who's in the medical ward are not the same circumstances that are present here with Mr. Hudson.
That is correct.
Now I'd like to move on to well, first I'll just touch on that. You indicated that the 500 cutoff for ETG testing and the 100 cutoff for ETS testing that was used by the lab in this case, that's the same cutoffs that you use in your lab.
Well, it's not used by the lab, but it is used by our colleague here in the court, Mrs. Foster. She, opts to not report anything below the 500 or the 100.
And your
Correct.
testimony was that that's generally a safe area to be.
Yes, and I did further that comment by saying that those were the cutoffs that we used in our laboratory.
Have you ever seen a false positive beyond this cutoff?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of an exposure that an individual generated, say, a value above, we're talking just ETS here, right?
Well, I'm talking about both, but if you'd like to speak about them separately, that's.
Yeah, I mean, so there are, yes, I mean, for example, we conducted a study that I kind of alluded to with regard to nursing, is having multiple people use just, in fact, I did it specifically during the COVID years when people were constantly using alcohol gels to wash their hands or clean their hands. I collected urines throughout the day and they did test positive, some for ETS only and some for ETG and ETS.
And at what levels were they testing positive?
It wouldn't be like, say if my cutoff was 500, they would be at 800-ish, somewhere around there. And if the cutoff for ETG was 100, they were probably 150, 200, somewhere around there, but above our cutoff.
But these were nurses that were using hand sanitizer during COVID, right?
Correct.
And Mr. Hudson, to your knowledge, is not a nurse that uses an abundance of hand sanitizer, correct?
I am not aware of it.
You weren't provided any information about an excessive use of hand sanitizer as part of your information to review to form your opinion.
Correct.
I'd like to discuss what you explained as normalized results. I also heard you use the term corrected results.
Yeah.
Are those one and the same, normalized results and corrected results? Why did you use those two terms interchangeably?
They are interchangeably. You're adjusting the result. You're correcting it for creatinine or normalizing it for creatinine.
And that just has to do with how dehydrated somebody is, right? Creatinine.
How hydrated and or dehydrated, correct?
Now, you would agree with me that at least on the June 11th test, even the normalized or corrected result was still over the cutoff for the ETS test.
It was barely over it, but yes, it was.
It was at a 110, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last.
Was that a 110?
Yeah, it was 110.
And the cutoff is 100.
Correct.
Okay, so it's over the cutoff for the ETS results, even when you take into account the creatinine.
Correct.
And you would agree with me that it's the same for June 26, 2025. That corrected or normalized result was over the cutoff by 25 nanograms.
Yep. Yes.
And are you aware that during that time period that the defendant went to Jamaica in between those tests?
Objection, relevance.
That's him if he's aware. That would change his opinion. He said that if he gets additional information, maybe it would change his opinion.
I don't know. Yeah, I let him ask if he's aware. We'll see where we're going with it.
Do you know that the defendant went on vacation in between June 11th and June 26th?
I believe I recall that discussion with his attorney. Yes.
Is it possible that drinking while in Jamaica between the dates of June 11th and June 26th could possibly produce an ETS result that even when normalized is still over the cutoff?
It's possible.
Now, you indicated that you found it notable that there is no variable on the ETS results. And being an assistant prosecutor, I'm more familiar, I guess, with blood tests and in the OWI realm, and we usually see like a plus or minus 0.002, right?
Correct.
But you said it's been your experience that this could be as high as 20% variable.
Depending on various labs and their cutoffs, the lower the cutoffs, the higher the variance. As the concentration gets higher, the variance tends to become more minimal. And then when you get up at the upper end of the calibration curve, the variance expands again. So depending on where you are in your curve, you can have a variance associated with that method.
So where we're at in the curve with these results that are just above the cutoff is generally within the normal or the mean range for typical results that one would see, correct?
I can't verify without looking at the laboratory validation method, but typically the results will range somewhere between, I would say 5% is a pretty decent low end number, and 20% is a higher number, maybe 15%, is a probably more realistic number. But that variance is probably associated with, a particular analytical technique such as this.
What does that mean?
Well, it just means that, some laboratories might have a little bit tighter analytical process because of how they manage the test and the samples. Others, laboratory and other instrumentation, it just has an inherent larger variance. So like I said, it could be plus or minus 5%, could be plus or minus 15%, but typically you got to be below 20%.
But you don't know what the variance was for this lab because it wasn't listed, correct?
Correct.
And so it would be either Tamara, or Miss Foster that would be the person to ask about that in regards to the testing that was done at this lab.
Correct. It should be the laboratory that does the testing.
That these results, that it's your opinion that this could be not consistent with alcohol consumption, but it could be from alcohol exposure. And you said that that could be something included in food or in some sort of, topical administration of alcohol. Is that what your testimony was?
Yeah, there could be topical, mouthwash, food, again, other methods.
And I know you were listening when Ms. Foster was testifying. We mentioned, for example, NyQuil. the list of the cold medicine that the defendant stated that he drank. NyQuil would how much NyQuil would somebody have to drink to produce a positive ETS result over the 100 cutoff?
I cannot estimate that because that's based on size and, different people's distribution of alcohol. So individuals would have to drink different types of, or different amounts. But typically, if it's like a NyQuil type alcohol, usually that's about 10%. So that's, that's equivalent of 2 beers if you just have a cup full, a portion that they give you, you typically it's that plastic cup, right? And it's a couple teaspoons full, right?
You're
So
saying that's equivalent to 2 beers?
no, just the 10% period, not the serving. But when you look at the jar and you see it's 10% alcohol, right, as one of the ingredients. So that's all. I'm only making that reference. In terms of volume, if the individual is doing multiple consumptions throughout a night, you might get to a single drink, might be a drink equivalent. Depends on how much they're consuming.
To reach the cutoff for ETS, though, isn't it true that there is literature and science that supports that one would have to drink an entire case of NyQuil to reach the cutoff for ETS?
I disagree with an entire case. No. If we want to talk about a breath test, maybe, but not a ETS.
But it's a significant amount.
I'm telling you, if an individual drank, say, a quarter of a bottle, I'll bet that they could produce a positive urine result.
Over the
They wouldn't
cutoff
have to drink. They wouldn't have to drink the full bottle. Yeah, with the cutoff of 100.
Do you have any literature to support that?
I'd have to look up Dr. Skipper's referenced earlier in the testimony because he's actually indicated it. And there are, in fact, actually, I have a reference article attached to this paper, or excuse me, it's article number 1, where people were rinsing their mouth, not even consuming the mouthwash, but just rinsing their mouths multiple times and produced a positive ETS result.
Don't do too much of that, y'all.
But you would agree with me that the circumstances that were present in that article, those circumstances are not all present with Mr. Hudson that you're aware of.
I am not aware that they are the same scenario as with Mr.
Any further questions for this witness?
I just have very few follow-up questions, gentlemen.
I'm gonna need to take a quick break. I'll
Okay,
be
sir.
just right back in a couple seconds.
Yes.
To cancel
She had to call her people and tell them she running late.
my plans for the evening. Okay, so we're back on the record here. Did we go off and are we back on?
We are on, yes.
Okay. With People versus Lucian Hudson 24M00414SD. Okay. So when I left, we were about to have some redirect of the witness, I believe.
That's correct, Your Honor. Not just a few follow-up questions for Dr. Wagner. Dr. Wagner, can you still hear me?
It's almost done, y'all. It's almost done. We less than 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Wagner, there was a question proposed to you about Mr. Hudson's travel to Jamaica. Do you recall that?
I do.
Specifically, the question was, were you aware he had gone to Jamaica from June 11th through June 17th, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed the tests that the test results from the Northwest labs that were provided to you, correct?
Yes.
And that second test that Mr. Hudson took was actually taken on June 11th, correct?
Correct.
So, and your understanding is that he traveled from June 11th to June 17th?
Yes.
And then he tested again June 26th.
Yes.
If he had consumed alcohol in Jamaica between June 11th and June 17th, would he have had the ability of having a positive test for ETS on June 26th?
It depends on how much he drank. I mean, if he really drank a lot, if the 17th is the last day when he's traveling home, the 26th is when that sample's collected, right? So, you know, that's 9 days out. I don't think ETS and ETG hang around that long.
So you're saying that it's not likely the positive test on June 26th was
No.
what the hell?
The largest
Okay.
window that's reported with that result is 80 hours. And it's not typically 80 hours for both. ETS has a shorter window than ETG. So you wouldn't see it from that exposure drinking from the 11th through the 17th. There's just too much time between the 17th and the 26th.
With regard to the normalized value that you calculated, even though the tests were over the cutoff of 100 nanograms per milliliter, you still can't say definitively that it's a result of alcohol consumption, correct?
Correct.
And when you're building in that 5 to 20% variance, does that make your opinion stronger or weaker?
You know, that's the interpretation that most people play, right? If you go plus or minus 25% or 20% or 5%, people can hang their hat on the plus 5% or the low end, right? But typically people will hang their hat on the low end just because they're being more cautious with the interpretation, right? It favors the patient to be on the lower end, but analytically it could be plus or minus whatever that variance is, whether it's 5%, 10%, or 20%.
And really the issue here is we don't know what the variance is because the lab didn't report it.
It didn't report it, correct?
Dr. Wagner, does things like body mass, weight, size, etc., does that affect ETS at all?
It can affect the production of ETG and ETS as well as ethanol distribution in general, because that particular drug gets distributed throughout the body wherever there's water. And so if somebody is a larger volume or a smaller volume, it can have an impact on that final result.
Again, though, we still can't definitively conclude that an individual over a cutoff has consumed alcohol with the facts specific to Mr. Hudson's case.
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, well, were you planning on calling this?
I would like to ask Ms. Foster some additional questions, Judge. I don't know how long it's going to take because
I'm done for now. At least we got him in.
Yeah.
If he wants to come back to listen to what she's got to say, then he's gonna have to do that. Because we gotta stop at this point.
And she was done. That was it. I'll give y'all a song to go out. Thanks to everybody that hung out because I seen people dropping off, was going to bed. This is a late one tonight. Let's go.
Morning call, case on the screen, probation violation, read it clean. May and June, numbers on file, everybody talking science for a while. ETG this, ETS that, defense saying hold up, where's the basis at? Courtroom tense, everywhere wait, one side pushing, one side throwing shade. It's a cutoff line where the story turns, one test drops and the whole room burns. No running down, no easy way through when the science talks, it points at you. Points at you. Witness said ETG can blur, outside exposure might disturb, but ETS, they called it clear, said environmental claims don't live here. Defense push back, can you really say how much was drunk or what happened that day? Judge jumped in, cut the noise in half, you can't count drinks from that math. It's the cutoff line where the story turns, one test drops and the whole room burns. No running now. science talks, it points at you. It points at you. Emails, lab sheets, chain of custody, what it means, and who can testify honestly. COVID meds and travel got raised, till the room stay locked on what the numbers say. 3 results hanging over one name, and the whole court circling the same old claim. It's the cutoff line where the story turns. One test drops and the whole room burns. No running now, no easy way through. When the science talks, it points at you. Not a wild scene, not a shouting match, just a courtroom trying to make the record match. On that cutoff line, the whole case swings in a quiet room where the science sings. It points at you.
They rescheduled it for next month. So when they come back, we'll see. I'll see how long it is. If y'all want me to bring it back, I'll bring it back. But yeah, judge had to go. And she did mention they had to shut that building. They had to close the building up. So she was completely done. They hurried up and got their date and they left. So I know it's sometime next month. Sometime. So just let me know what you want. But thanks for hanging out. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out if you didn't. And I'll see y'all on the next one.